Good morning. My topic of presentation is management of fungal sepsis, and my moderator is Suresh sir. What is sepsis? Sepsis is the body's harmful systemic reaction to microbial infection, which might be proven or whether any clinical suspicion is there. And criteria includes two or more of the following, that is temperature greater than 38 degrees or less than 36 degrees, and heart rate greater than 90 beats per minute, respiratory rate greater than 20 breaths per minute, or PaCO2 less than 32 mmHg, WBC is greater than 12,000 cells per mm cube or less than 4,000 cells per mm cube, or greater than 10% of the cells being immature forms. So any two of the criteria should be present to tell a patient is in sepsis. Coming to fungal sepsis in intensive care unit are increasing and are associated with considerable morbidity and mortality. It is because of the presence of multiple risk factors and severe illness, which is making patients admitted in ICU particularly vulnerable, most of them being immunocompromised patients. As the patient population ages and survival of the patients with multiple comorbidities and advanced diseases is increasing, rates of fungal infection are expected to continue to rise. Various risk factors for invasive fungal infections in the ICU may be like usage of broad spectrum antimicrobials, patients having burns, candida colonization, central venous or urinary catheter, patients receiving chemotherapy or corticosteroids, diabetes mellitus, patients experiencing graft versus host disease, hematopoietic stem cell transplant, hemodialysis, and patients in high severity of illness, Apache-2 score being greater than 20, and patients on immunosuppressing therapies, patients having liver failure, patient undergone major surgery, malignancy, mucosal damage, necrotizing pancreatitis, neonates, patients having neutropenia, prolonged duration of ICU stay, prolonged ventilation, renal failure, solid organ transplant, structural lung disease, and total parenteral nutrition. In this setting of fungal infections, invasive fungal infections are predominantly caused by the Candida species. Currently, Candidemia represents the fourth most common healthcare associated bloodstream infection and the third leading cause of these infections in ICU patients. Mortality rates associated with invasive candidiasis have been reported to be about 40 to 60% in ICU patients and 80 to 90% in patients experiencing septic shock. In the presence of mucosal barrier breakdown or immunosuppression, these organisms become significant pathogens that can lead to increased morbidity and mortality, involving not only the infections of mucosal surfaces and the urinary tract, but also as more disseminated disease like meningitis, endocarditis, and intra-abdominal infections. And various other non-albicans species are increasing in incidence. Candida glabrata is the second most common pathogen isolated, followed by Candida parapsilosis, which is commonly seen in patients who are having chronic catheter placement. Example like total parenteral nutrition. Rates of Candida tropicalis, Candida krusei, Candida lucidni remain stable, and these are still considered important pathogens. This shift in epidemiology has significant implications because non-albicans species often have either reduced susceptibility or resistance to fluconazole. Traditionally, invasive aspergillosis was thought to be a disease found mainly in neutropenic and hematopoietic stem cell transplant patients. However, current understanding is that the invasive aspergillosis is also an important pathogen in non-neutropenic critically ill patients, such as those receiving corticosteroids and those with chronic lung diseases or liver failure. Outbreaks of Aspergillus have been linked to poor air filtration, construction, and even contaminated medical equipment and hand lotion. Mortality rates in ICU patients with invasive aspergillosis are around 60 to 90%. Other fungal pathogens causing diseases in patients with immunocompromise include Cryptococcus species, Fusarium species, Pseudosporium species, and Mucormycosis species. These infections by the above pathogens are rare in ICU but occur more in patients receiving chronic immunological therapy for either rheumatological or any other chronic conditions. Risk factor assessment. Prevalence of risk factors in ICU patients complicates our decision when to use prophylactic or preemptive antifungal therapy, and there is a strong correlation between Candida colonization and infection. Rates of colonization increases with the longer ICU stays and exposure to risk factors. Clinical prediction tools that incorporate several risk factors into a scoring systems have been evaluated for their ability to predict the invasive candidiasis. Various scores are present like Candida score, Ostrowski's rule, Nebraska Medical Center rule, and Candidemia rule. So in Candida score, uh, if medical or surgical patient is in medical or surgical ICU for greater than 7 days, we can use it. Um, the points we consider in this score is severe sepsis, which is 2 points. Major surgery, it's 1 point. Total parenteral nutrition, 1 point, and multifocal Candida colonization being 1 point. Score if it's greater than 3 is taken as a major risk factor. Ostrowski rule for patients in medical or surgical ICU is greater than 4 days. Major criteria include systemic antibiotic use, central venous catheter, and minor criteria include surgery, immunosuppressants, corticosteroids, pancreatitis, dialysis, total parenteral nutrition. So positive will be two major factors or two major factors plus at least one minor factor, or one major and at least two minor factors, or three major or at least one minor factor. The Nebraska Medical Center rule for patients in medical or surgical ICUs for greater than 4 days. Like usage of broad spectrum antibiotics 1.5 points, central venous catheter 0.9 points, and total parenteral nutrition from days 1 to 3 0.9 points. Steroid use in 7 days before ICU admission up to day 3 is 0.4 points, and abdominal surgery 0.9 points, and pre-ICU length of stay is around 0.039. If score is greater than or equal to 2.4, it is considered as positive. Candidemia rule is applicable for all hospitalized patients with culture positive, severe sepsis, or septic shock. Antibiotics within 30 days, central venous catheter, admitted from nursing home or total parenteral nutrition carries, all of them carry 2 points each. Transfer from outside hospital or receiving mechanical ventilation, 1 point each. And lung as presumed source of sepsis, we can subtract 6 points. So if score is greater than 3, it is considered as positive. And various diagnostic tests may be available for diagnosing invasive fungal infections, like measuring beta D glucon. We'll use it in Candida species and Aspergillus, and Mannan antigen or anti-Mannan antibody. We use it for only Candida species. Nucleic acid PCR, all species it can be used, but currently only available for Candida species, and Galactomannan, Aspergillus, and some other molds it can be used. So once the risk factor assessment is made and tests are done, preliminary tests are done, we can consider starting on antifungals, either a definite 2 diagnosis occurring or risk factors. We initiate the therapy, and the next step in management is the choice of optimal antifungal treatment and dosing regimen. So there is a difference in mechanism of action, spectrum of activity, pharmacokinetics, and toxicity affecting this decision for a variety of clinical situations. Currently, 3 classes of antifungals, a total of 8 drugs, are approved by US Food and Drug Administration for invasive candidiasis. The first class of antifungals that became available for treatment of invasive candidiasis is the polyene group, like amphotericin B deoxycholate and its 3 lipid formulations like liposomal and amphotericin B lipid complex, and amphotericin B cholesterol sulfate complex. And among all these, amphotericin B cholesterol sulfate does not carry an FT indication for candidemia. These lipid formation have been a major advance because they provide less nephrotoxicity than that observed with the conventional deoxycholate amphotericin. All of these formations exert their saddle effects by binding to ergosterol in fungal cell membrane, leading to depolarization, increased permeability, and ultimately cell death. Second class of antifungals is triozoles, and FDA-approved agents include fluconazole and voriconazole. These drugs target fungal cell membrane ergosterol synthesis, the major cell membrane component, by inhibition of fungal cytochrome P450 dependent enzyme, and the mechanism is generally considered fungistatic. The most recently developed group of antifungals is echinocandin class, which includes caspofungin, micafungin, and anidulafungin. All three are approved for candidemia and cytogenous candida species. Mechanism for this is inhibition of beta 1,3 glucan synthase, an enzyme responsible for the production of major cell wall component. Resistance. Resistance mechanisms are found in fungal pathogens include the induction of flexpunks and or genetic mutations and increased expression of genes encoding these mechanisms. Biofilms are also an important cause of resistance in Candida species because of poor penetration of the azoles into this complex cellular matrices. Aspergillus species also form biofilms in the lung that contribute to the difficulty in treating these infections. This is a table indicating the actions of the various drug classes and their site of actions and their resistant mechanisms. So, any suspected invasive candidiasis, like patients not responding to broad spectrum antibiotics, obtain a blood culture and 2 consecutive beta D glucose levels, and see for presence of multiple risk factors by risk factor assessment scores. If it's greater than 3, then start echinocandin. Either you can consider fluconazole in a stable patient with low risk for resistant species, or if the candida score is less than 3, don't start any antifungal therapy and wait for blood cultures and beta D glucon results. So if it's positive, continue or initiate echinocandin, and same thing, clinically stable patients we start fluconazole, and if it's negative, consider discontinuing antifungal therapy if you previously started on antifungals, and treat for at least 14 days if positive, and consider de-escalating antifungal therapy to IV or oral fluconazole after at least 5 days and the patient is clinically stable. All the echinocandins have proven efficacy for the treatment of candidemia and are considered interchangeable for the management of this disease. One exception is the neutropenic patients for whom caspofungin may be preferred for empiric therapy because of a lack of data with other agents. Support for this class as first-line agents come from shift in epidemiology towards non-albicans species and low levels of resistance in. Anidulafungin is superior to fluconazole for the treatment of candidemia caused by Candida albicans and in patients with severity of illness. Fluconazole therapy can be considered for patients with mild disease in institutions with lower incidence of non-albican species. Voriconazole is also effective for candidemia, but adverse effects, drug interactions, cost, and potential for cross-resistant to fluconazole limits its use. Another role for fluconazole therapy is in the setting of ocular involvement of infection. Echinocandins have poor eye penetration, therefore an azole, if susceptible, would be preferred. Treatment of candidemia should continue at least for 14 days after the first negative blood culture, but longer courses may be needed in the presence of abscesses or deep tissue infections. Efficacy and safety of step-down therapy to an oral azole after 5 days of anidulafungin in patients who were febrile were hemodynamically stable, were not non-neutropenic, had documented clearance of candida from the bloodstream, and were able to tolerate oral therapy. The IDSA guidelines recommend that all patients with candidemia receive a dilated fundoscopic examination within the first week of diagnosis to rule out optic involvement. Intravenous catheters are often the source, therefore the catheter removal should be considered and symptoms should resolve within 72 hours. So the persistence of symptoms beyond this point should give a reason to consider inadequate source control versus suboptimal drug exposure or resistance. In intra-abdominal infections, empiric therapy can be considered in presence of any risk factors or positive serological markers for Candida. Definitive antifungal therapy is only recommended if Candida is recovered from an adequate specimen. Positive Candida cultures taken from dens placed more than 24 hours ago should be considered contamination and should not be treated. And therapy with an echinocandin or lipid-based amphotericin B is preferred. Azole therapy, similar to treatment of candidemia, can be considered for mild disease or step-down therapy. Treatment should continue for 10 to 14 days in those with confirmed infection. Empiric therapy should be discontinued if Candida is not found in after 3 to 5 days and patient improves, or immediately if no improvement is seen, because the likelihood of any benefit is minimal. Urinary tract infections. Isolation of Candida from the urinary tract of critically ill patients is common. Decision to treat is complicated by the inability to determine if classical signs and symptoms of the infections are present. Most patients can simply be managed by removing the Foley's catheter. Treatment with the antifungal therapy should be considered in patients with sepsis of unknown origin, those with neutropenia, or those undergoing urological procedures because of the high risk for the systemic disease. Choice of antifungal agent is limited by poor penetration of most antifungals into the urine. Fluconazole remains the drug of choice and treatment should be continued for 14 days. Amphotericin B bladder washes are difficult to administer and data supporting the efficacy are lacking. Lung infections. Isolation of Candida species from respiratory tract of critically ill patients is common. Occurrence of true pneumonia from these organisms is rare because of the innate immunity of the lung. Diagnosis is challenging because of lack of specific signs, symptoms, and radiographic findings, and because it requires lung biopsy. Decision to treat should be based on evidence of disseminated disease or host factor suggesting a high risk of infection with no source of disease. And specific host factors include neutropenia, hematopoietic stem cell transplant, immunosuppressing therapies, corticosteroids, and severe immunodeficiency. All of the available antifungal agents penetrate the lung well and are reasonable options. Empiric therapy with voriconazole may be preferred because aspergillosis is also a potential cause of lung infections in these patient populations. And recommendations for management of invasive mold infections in critically ill patients are largely extrapolated from data evaluating treatment in hematological malignancies. Amphotericin B and its lipid formulations remain the most broad-spectrum antifungals available and should be strongly considered for empiric therapy in setting of an unidentified mold infection or in patients on previous azole therapy. Voriconazole is now recommended as first-line therapy for Aspergillus infections. This recommendation is based on data indicating more successful outcomes and improved survival rates compared with amphotericin B, while causing lesser adverse effects. The echinocandins have been shown to have activity against Aspergillus. Only caspofungin is approved for this indication, but all three agents have been used clinically. Echinocandins are usually reserved for patients intolerant to other therapies in refractory diseases. However, more recent data regarding the combination of voriconazole and anidorafungin for the treatment of invasive aspergillosis suggest an earlier role for combination therapy, including echinocandins in patients with presumed invasive aspergillosis. Prophylactic therapy in non-neutropenic immunocompetent patients cannot be recommended based on insufficient data. Empiric therapy should be begin even in those without traditional risk factors at the earliest signs or clinical suspicion of aspergillosis. This approach is appropriate because delays in the appropriate therapy for aspergillosis have been shown to increase length of stay, healthcare costs, and mortality. Use of biomarkers mentioned earlier may help identify patients that may benefit from antifungal therapy earlier. Optimal duration of treatment has not been determined. Most patients will require a prolonged course of several weeks based on resolution of clinical symptoms and radiographic findings. Combination antifungal therapy for aspergillosis is recommended as an option for salvage therapy in patients not responding or with breakthrough symptoms. Up to 30% of ICU patients have been reported to have refractory disease, and observational studies have indicated up to 50% of patients often receiving combination therapy. Typical combination regimens include involving using two agents with different mechanisms, such as echinocandin with either an azole or amphotericin. Because of the potential for antagonism, combination therapy with azole and amphotericin is not recommended. Despite frequent use of combination therapy in ICU for refractive aspergillosis, very few data exists for its benefit. So therapeutic drug monitoring will see when extremes of age, if the compliance is questionable, concomitant use with acid suppressing therapy drug interactions being significant, or extensive, bulky, or disseminated infection, malabsorption, obesity, organ dysfunction, prophylaxis in high-risk patients, renal replacement therapy, use of extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, or cardiopulmonary bypass. This therapeutic drug monitoring, knowing the MIC of the organisms, using clinical judgment, and adequately monitoring clinical response to therapy must be used in conjunction with the serum drug concentration data. This is a table suggesting various antifungals and their minimal target concentrations, its timing of concentrations, and concentrations which are associated with toxicity. So, fungal infections are associated with considerable morbidity and mortality in ICU patients even when appropriately treated. Delays in therapy can negatively impact outcomes and increase healthcare costs. Several challenges exist in identifying patients at risk of these infections and in achieving an accurate diagnosis. Thank you.